Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here with Brother Bro. It is time to review A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the latest film from director Marielle Heller, whose last film, Can You Ever Forgive Me, was one of my favorite films of the year. I think it was in your top 10 as well. So we were really excited for this one. It's about Mr. Rogers. Excellent documentary came out about him last year. We both loved that. So really looking like we were going to love this movie. This film's about a journalist who is tasked to do a piece about Mr. Rogers, and so he goes to interview him, and of course his life, changes because of it, and he learns lessons from Mr. Rogers. It's not the Mr. Rogers movie you expected. In some ways, I was actually really thrilled. It could have gone down like a more sappy route, but this movie was actually like really a heavier like indie drama. It felt like, the cinematography, like some might see it as very dull and drab, but it sort of did what her last film did, where it creates like an atmosphere of loneliness and isolation, like that the character is feeling. Internally, this guy's dealing with some dark things, and then there's somehow like this saintly Mr. Rogers creature inhabiting it. I really connected with that part of the movie. I like that it had this weirder tone and that it was sort of darker and willing to like dive into adult subjects. I left it on like a really high note where it did so many things right for me, where it was like they got Mr. Rogers right. Tom Hanks fucking nailed it. Matthew Reeves was like also really good. I've never seen him in anything, and I want to see him in more things. It was touching, and it also felt real in a way that it didn't need to be, and authentic. My main problem when I think back on the movie is this relationship of Rogers and this guy, as like Rogers becomes his therapist, and that's really bizarre. Like, normal people do not go seeking out patients to give therapy to for no reason. And that's literally what happens in the movie. And that's very strange. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, this is such a strange behavior. Who is Mr. Rogers to like want to give this to people? And doesn't that also sort of reveal how broken he is? But like also he's not fixing himself. So like what is he doing it for? Does he just like fixing broken people for no reason? Like, I don't think it's clear why he gives him this. It gets Mr. Rogers right, but as far as like knowing the man, it felt a little superficial because the movie's about this relationship that's extremely one-sided. The whole movie, I'm kind of sitting there and I'm like, I think I might be dreaming. Yeah. I dreamed that I saw a version of Mr. Rogers that I didn't really like, and it was weird. Yeah. And then I woke up, and then I went to see the movie, and it was a great Thanksgiving, joyful, heartfelt movie that I wanted it to be. But I was kind of sitting there like, I don't like the cinematography. Like, I get what they're going for with the look, but It also just didn't look good. Kind of amateurish and like lacked coloring. I did check during the movie to see if I was dreaming, because there's actually like a dream sequence in the movie that is completely like bizarre, and it goes and goes and goes, and it's like, whoa. Like, what kind of Mr. Rogers movie am I watching? Like, did they really make a Mr. Rogers movie that has this in it? Like, it's literally kind of shocking how bizarre this movie is at times. The dream sequences didn't work for me. It is ultimately a very surface level film where it didn't feel like it pulled me into either Rogers or this man. It just kind of felt like I'm watching a movie that's telling me things about the characters, and I'm not absorbed in their reality. This character is very sad, meets Mr. Rogers, who's a character who like knows how to bring joy to people, and so Mr. Rogers brings joy to the character. It's done in a way that's very expected. Yeah, their relationship is so clinical. It's about a character who's going in to pick at his brain and interview things, so he's asking Mr. Rogers things, and Mr. Rogers is trying to get deeper into him, and he's trying to get deeper into him, and you don't see them do like real life things. Like, they don't go fishing, and they don't spend time together. They don't have discussions about things that aren't just like trying to get to know each other. This miserable man, I don't know what makes him happy. And Mr. Rogers, I barely know what upsets him. It was really unfortunate. I just didn't feel like I got pulled into any of these characters. All the tearjerker scenes in the end didn't have any heft to them, and I was at such a distance from this film, I wasn't really enjoying it. I actually agree with all your criticisms, but I was still invested in the film, and it did have moments that moved me. I thought it was interesting that they portray Rogers as someone who is really hard to relate to, and this guy's like, I can't relate to him. Like, I can't get to this guy. Who is he? But eventually,
Rogers does get to him, and I don't understand how he does that when I look back at the film.
Yeah,
and I don't know how you go about making a movie where a character learns something because they're changed on the inside that feels natural, and this movie is not really an exception. The way that they represent this transformation, it comes across at times as like really hokey. The dream sequences are strange and like not in like the greatest way, and there's one scene that's actually like kind of cliche, and I don't want to say exactly what it is. Yeah, no, you know what it is. It's like
I hated that. Every change internally in the character that you're supposed to feel is like, where did this come from? Like, it went in and, like, took the character and put a key in his back and just, like, turned it on, and then, like, oh, now he's, like, changed.
Oh, now he's a little bit more accepting, etc. The level of, like, disagreeableness in his personality and negativity. His wife was, like, almost too, like, loving for this kind of man. She's almost too understanding and forgiving of him, where if I were his wife and I had, like, was taking care of a baby all the time, I wouldn't want, like, any negativity coming from him in my life. And I'd be very upset with him. Like, I would be having, like, a long-term issue with this character if I were her. They could have used that to push the character, and then he realizes, like, what he has to come back to, and it's about, like, loving her. And they don't go for that in this movie, and instead they make him out to be a guy who is not very likable, but still somehow has this, like, really healthy, good relationship with his wife and kid, which wouldn't be realistic if you had a guy with this kind of personality.
Yeah, like, where are the stakes? Like, if you establish in the beginning of the movie that, like, his attitude was really affecting his life, maybe then there's a little stakes in there. Like,
his life should have been affected
There
more.
were no stakes. There was no, like, physical goal. Like, this movie was purely, like, the spiritual and emotional transformation.
It was a spiritual movie.
A spiritual movie that looked very bland, and the only way that it used filmmaking to, like, transcend just, like, showing characters was through the dream sequences, and that was super weak.
But there's also that, like, what the camera does in that scene. It pushes in on Rogers, and then suddenly he's making eye contact with you.
Oh yeah, that was so weird when he was making eye contact.
Yeah, I don't know. Like maybe don't include that. Maybe don't include that. I don't know. No. Fucking include that. Yeah, that was weird.
I was like, is he looking at me, and why?
I know what you're going for. I get it, but like it was weird, and it made me feel weird. And I wanted that moment to work. Like, I really did.
The directing in Can You Ever Forgive Me was so good.
Yeah, like, flawless.
Like, I was like, where are the directorial choices that are motivating, like, the characters? That was what you did so well.
I actually think the directing was good, and I would applaud her for this movie and say, like, she did a good job.
Wouldn't.
But I feel like the whole story and the approach to it was kind of a misfire in a weird way. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because, like, I literally left the movie being like, that was a 9 out of 10. Like,
wow, did I really do that to you?
No, seriously, no, you didn't do it. I was thinking about it. I was taking notes on my own, and I was like, wait, this story is, like, super basic. And I thought it was more profound while watching it because I liked the choices that she was making because they were unconventional. And there are some scenes I really like. The scene where he's, like, operating the puppet is really, really good. It's really good.
I like that.
So there are some scenes that, like, I was, and there are some lines that, like, I remember. They're really great Rogers moments. When I'm thinking about, like, the character and whether this makes sense and, like, oh, wait a second, he's just his therapist. Why is he his therapist? He's a real person. He's not a therapist. He's not getting paid. Like, it becomes, like, weird to me. And, like, I'm like, going down a lot from this 9 out of 10. Wow. I couldn't tell when I was watching it if it was a bad movie. Stop.
You're coming
get
over
away
here.
from me. I enjoyed the movie and I liked it, so I have to go to positive review.
Oh, you should.
I'm so conflicted on it now. I'm like, what?
It truly was very weird to be watching this movie and be like, how is this, like, what I'm getting?
She was not manipulative in certain moments where she could have been, and it worked really well, where she'll keep, like, just a medium shot to let you watch the whole thing.
I agree.
And, like, is not tugging at your heartstrings at every second she gets. Like, so I actually admire what she did with this movie. I really do. I think that's what saves it from being, like, a complete generic mess. But at the same time, I don't know if it would have been actually better if they just went along with it and were like, yeah, this is kind of a sappy movie. Let's just, like, play it up.
I have to stress that Hanks is, like, really good.
Yeah.
And he's really funny sometimes, just how accurate he is. It's like, oh my god, like, Mr. Rogers, like, would totally say something like that. Tom Hanks is perfect. He's not doing an outright imitation, but he's being somebody who feels internally like they're the same person as Mr. Rogers was. It's actually amazing. I love Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Every time he's on the screen, he lights it up in an unusual way. So I think Tom Hanks he's potentially alone getting nominated.
Yeah.
Makes me worried for him, but I think he should get nominated. The screenplay is also in contention. It's maybe like that number 5 slot.
Because that category is not crowded.
Unless Joker gets in.
If there were any other movie, I feel like that was contending more for screenplay, I would easily have that in. I think that is a very easy spot for Oh, Hustlers is in that category?
Yeah.
Okay, then
I don't know.
Then I'm putting Hustlers. Like,
Really?
Yeah, I would put in like a lot of different movies over this movie. I don't think it'll get nominated for screenplay. I think they'll find like whatever else they can. Yeah, this movie, it makes so much sense. Like, this is not an awards movie even. Like, just for Tom Hanks, I would say he should get supporting actor nomination, and I am worried for him because people might start watching this movie and be like, no thank you, I'm pretty bored and I don't want to watch a depressing movie. Which is not a criticism against the movie, that's just like the kind of movie it is.
But I was like surprised at the lack of my own emotional investment in this film. Now, this film has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow.
I am going to give it a 5 out of 10.
Damn.
I thought I might have been dead
You're
during
right.
the movie. I just wasn't feeling anything. And I was like, should I be? Am I dead? Like,
And I was actually very impressed by Matthew Rhys. I really want to see him in more movies.
Yeah.
I'm going to give this movie a 7 to balance it out between, like, I have lots of criticisms, but I actually, like, found the movie worthwhile nonetheless. It's very, like, well-intentioned, and it has a good message. It has several good messages in it. There's just a lot of problems from, like, a story level. Like, it's a movie about a relationship that is incredibly one-sided, and that is the fundamental thing about this movie that doesn't work and kind of doomed it.
thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Leave that dislike if you loved the movie and you don't like that we talked trash about it a lot. How did Mr. Rogers fix every problem in your life?